Hi there, my name is Rachel, and today I am going to be taking a look at the Ohuhu Aqua Natural Brush. These are watercolor markers. This is the 36 color set, and I want to say this also comes in a 72 color set. So, just to show you. So this comes with a 12-sheet watercolor pad so that you can test out your watercolor markers. It also comes with this little piece of cardstock that already has printed on it the number and color name of all the markers in the set. And then comes with 2 trays of these watercolor markers. And these trays are actually kind of nice. They're a flexible plastic, so it's easier to get these pens in and out than the ones that are maybe a little harder that you have to like really snap the markers in and out. So I like that. And it also comes with an extra watercolor brush that you fill up, because these are actually a watercolor marker, so you can actually just use these to do watercoloring techniques. Okay, so I have now filled out the swatch, so you can see all the different colors and the brightness. Is another there's a drop of water on here that muted that, but so this is the colors that are included in the 36 set. And you can see that there's a nice combination between the light pastels and some of the really vibrant colors. They also made it in a swatch. It's more the rainbow. Companies always seem to do the colors like all over the place, and I personally prefer to see the colors kind of more in a line, so I can kind of get an idea of the full spectrum that you're actually getting. So that is the 36 color set, and like I said, nice light colors and then some really vivid ones as well. The tips are a little bit different than other standard markers, and to show you what I mean, the tips of these, rather than usually the brush tip ones are just kind of like a felt, and they're very flexible. This is actually, if you can see, this is actually paintbrush end. It's an actual brush end, so there's individual little fibers. So it works just like using a watercolor paintbrush when you use these markers. And just to show the difference of a different kind of marker, the normal kind of marker is just a piece of felt that is flexible for a brush tip end, but it's still one solid piece. You can't separate that out. So like I said, the nice thing about these natural brush markers is that they're actually a real brush at the end. So the neat thing about these watercolor markers is that you can actually use them in a variety of different ways depending on what your preferred art style is. So I'm going to show you, first off, you can actually use them like watercolors. So here we have, and this is the paper that was included in the pack. Now it doesn't actually give you any specifications on what this paper is consisted of, but as a watercolor paper, it's got a very soft, very kind of soft, fibery feel, so it feels like it would actually absorb a lot of water. The back side is smooth, and the top side, which feels much more kind of dry and soft, is very textured for watercolor use. So there's different ways you can go about using these markers. One method is to, and this is the brush that came with the set, the water brush, is to wet down the paper first, and you'd want to use a watercolor paper for this. So I'm just going to add an amount of water onto this paper, and then I'm going to take my markers and I'm just going to add them into that already wet paper, and you can see how it just kind of bleeds in, just like watercolors do. Although I did find that this will dry pretty light, so I actually, for this one, I went over it a couple times. But so you can do wet on wet, and it works just fine. Another method that you can use for these is to just put down the markers themselves. And I did find that after I put the markers on water, it took a bit to get the kind of the color flowing out of the marker again. As you can see, that water kind of seeps into that brush, and then you kind of got to get that marker to start flowing. So I can just put the marker down dry, and then I can go ahead and take a watercolor brush, and I can just start blending those colors in and painting just like watercolor. And then another method that you can try is actually just using the brushes themselves, the markers themselves, as the brushes. So you put in your color, and then you can just start blending another color right in. Now, of course, the only issue about doing that is you're going to be getting some color rub off from the darker colors onto lighter colors, and things like that. But as you can see, you can go ahead and get some different techniques by just using those markers together to kind of blend them to get nice gradients. The other thing I notice about these colors, you can also, that's if you want to use these as like actual watercolors, to do watercolor effects. You can also just use these like regular markers on paper, to do like coloring in coloring books and things like that. But I did find some issues with these markers, like a normal felt tip. I'll show you this other felt tip. So normal felt tip marker, you can do light lines, and then you can do broader lines, and then depending on how thick it is, you can get really broad lines, because it's a solid piece. Now with these markers, I found that you could get the light lines and then broader lines, and it is smoother, but I found with the really broad, you really had to go over it. It didn't, I don't know if these were too dry, but it really just didn't want to do solid lines. And this is on textured paper. I even did it on smooth paper that doesn't have that texture. I found that when I used the broad end of the brush, it really needed to be gone over a couple different times, because it just didn't want to, the color just didn't want to flow through the brush side like that. So that was one issue that I did find with these. But on the whole, this is a very nice, it's a very nice way of using markers. And one thing that you might notice, if I take my other watercolor marker, when I fill in spaces with it, it kind of leaves a different texture. The texture is much more rough, especially one of the issues you get with the water markers is that you get those crossover lines a lot more, depending on how you're coloring, which can make for very liney art when you're trying to fill in large block areas. And these ones, these are much smoother. If you can see how it works, these actually go pretty smooth. And while you do get a little bit of that lines, it kind of bleeds, almost like an alcohol marker. It's not as good as an alcohol marker, but it does kind of bleed into itself to kind of fill in and get a more solid color. So these are really nice. They're really smooth. They're really soft. But I did find for like coloring and stuff, you kind of have to dabble a lot with these markers, just because of the fact that, as you can see, you're not always getting a full color through the brush. So the color doesn't flow quite as fluidly through the brush as the felt tip ones. Like the felt tip ones, you don't usually have an issue of it being, an uneven amount. You put the brush down, you're pretty much going to get solid color unless your markers are running out. But I found even these brand new, that when you're coloring, there's just times when that color's not flowing through the bristles. So you do kind of have to do a little bit of extra dabbling. But like I said, even while doing that, the colors actually blend together pretty nicely, and you can get nice solid color fills without that really, really streaky final marker look. And then you can see you can go over it, and it kind of like an alcohol marker, it actually all kind of bleeds together, and you can get a nice smooth looking color fill with these. So these are actually pretty decent markers in that respect. Okay, and so to kind of see how these markers look in action, I have done a picture with them in this book. Now, just for people who might not know, this book has all of the pictures with the black background, so that is not the markers for the one I have done. But here's a picture I did completely with the set of the Ohuhu watercolor markers. And as you can see, you can get some really, really vibrant, vibrant colors coming through here. I did multiple layers with different ones. And now, because this is the Amazon paper, I did not add extra water. I use these pretty much just exactly like a felt tip marker, so I did not do any watercoloring effects other than just kind of blending a very little bit with some of these colors with the brushes themselves. Now, and like I said, with the water flow, these brushes feel, I want to say they feel a little dry compared to maybe some other ones, but overall, using them with many layers, you do see there is just a hint of rumpling, but it's really not that bad rumpling on the back after using it. And you could probably even, like, this is probably not even going to make the book kind of get that crinkle feel when you do a lot of water pages together, but you probably could also, if you need to, you can spray the page down and iron it to get it flat again. But like I said, even doing a lot of layers of the marker, I did not get a huge amount of rumple like I do with some of my other marker sets, especially the watercolor kind of markers. So as you can see, really vibrant. You can do a lot of very detailed work with these markers. So all in all, these are actually a pretty fun set of markers to use, and I definitely like them better than the felt tip markers for the fact that they do get a smoother color. You can get like I did a base of this light pink, and you don't see that really streaky look that you might get if you use the water-based markers. So I really did like this set, but like I said, it was a little bit more fiddly because you have to do more dabbing to get that color to flow through those brush bristles, which you don't have when you're using a felt tip marker. So, really nice set, actually. I really liked it. Here, you can see, I like to keep my colors in kind of a rainbow order, so I put them in an order that is more appealing for me and easier for me to pick. But like I said, I really like this case with the flexible plastic, so I don't have issues of popping them in and out at all. They're really easy to access and to use. It does come with this nice little watercolor pad of sheets, which, I mean, they even say it's basically for testing out techniques, but of course you can do some little miniature pieces of artwork with that. And then, of course, it also comes in the little plastic case so that you can keep all your markers and you don't have to buy a separate case to keep them in. So all in all, the main points for these markers is, you know, they are water-based, so they're not the alcohol-based marker. They have a very smooth, fluid, you can achieve very smooth, fluid effects with these markers because they do kind of blend together like watercolor. So I think that in the end, you will end up with less streaky. It always depends. Some colors are going to be streakier than others. That always happens. But I think for the most part, these will be less streaky than just your standard water-based markers. But you do have to know that you'll probably be being a little bit more fiddly with them because that color flow is not quite as consistent. But it also allows you to, if you know that, you can use it for, you know, getting effects. Maybe you don't want a full stroke like regular markers. Maybe you actually want to get that kind of varied stroke look. So as long as you know what you're getting with these, you can use these to achieve some really nice effects. And as you can see, these actually were able to create some really bright and vivid colors. So I definitely enjoy this set, and I will probably be trying to use these as some backgrounds for colored pencils. One of the things I like markers for, I can do full pictures with markers, but usually the ones that have the really tiny spaces. For the larger spaces, I like to get kind of a bit of a smoother background and then do all the detailing later on with colored pencils. And I think that these will work really well for that. So if you've been looking for a different kind of a water-based marker and you'd like to try out The watercolor markers, you can see that they work a little bit differently than the felt tip markers. So this might actually be something that would really work for your style. So I hope that this review and some of these mini demonstrations have been useful so that you can actually see how these markers really perform. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.